Welcome to episode 3 of Kill Chains and Coffee. I'm Greg Heon. I'm the head of product management at Armadin, and I'm joined today by Evan, one of Armadin's founders and our chief offensive security officer. Evan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you on to talk about some of the cool kill chains Armadin's finding. So this is our 3rd episode, and the last 2 we did have been from the internet. How did Armadin get remote code execution on real servers from large real companies, right? Like, we specialize in running safe AI-powered attacks, and we've tried to demonstrate impact, right? Like, how do we tell you what an AI-powered adversary can do from the internet? And today, we want to keep doing that and tell that story even deeper. And I really want to focus on 2 big points here. One is that these kill chains that we're going to show you, they chain together findings, and every finding along the way is reachable, exploitable, and then has a blast radius that you care about, right? That's something that hurts your company if an attacker is able to do this to you. And the second is that they have wildly different starting points and objectives, right? Armadin's attacker can go after any type of IT you have, and we think that makes it really special. So with that, let's kick off. Let's talk about kill chain number 1. Evan, you want to tell us the story?
Yeah. So Greg asked me, he's like, Evan, I want a cool kill chain that shows like from the internet into some sort of internal type of system. And generally most internet facing systems are going to be hosted in some sort of cloud environment or cluster or Kubernetes pod, AWS, etc. And so for this kill chain, I'm going to show how we traverse from an application all the way into the web server, all the way into a Kubernetes cluster and pod, and then break out into a cluster, which is actually really cool. And so for this case, we started unauthenticated from the internet, and there was a web application that was vulnerable to server-side request forgery, or SSRF. And what that means is, generally in this particular case, there's an HTTP header that you can manipulate and allow the server to point to an arbitrary URL. And this particular URL was for an internal API endpoint that is not accessible from the internet, but it is accessible from that particular server. And so in manipulating the particular header, we were able to call that particular API and leverage methods from the API to do whatever it is that we want. But in this particular case, there was no method specifically like super interesting. This was like a workflow engine API. But what we were able to do is that we noticed that that particular API was vulnerable to a CVE from 2025. This is 2026, by the way. And it was a remote code execution vulnerability. And so in this particular case, we were able to leverage the SSRF vulnerability to call the internal API, craft a POC for this particular CVE that allowed us to execute remote code execution on the API endpoint. And so this is chaining SSRF to API RCE on the API endpoint, which was really cool because then it landed us in a particular Kubernetes pod. And so it doesn't stop there. This story continues. So you're now on a Kubernetes pod. What do? Generally what you do is you do additional reconnaissance. Like, what is on the pod? What is on this particular system? What are the namespaces, additional APIs, secrets, databases, etc.? And so we continue doing enumeration and reconnaissance on this particular pod. And lo and behold, there's a database on this particular pod, and there's additional namespace information. And you would be surprised, but there was a services accounts that are stored in this particular database. And so we were able to pull back database credentials in clear text. And we were able to then leverage those particular credentials that had overly permissive access to that particular pod. And we were able to essentially, with this particular privileged container, we're able to mount the host operating system of the cluster hosting the pod. And so we were able to break out of the pod and then get access to the Kubernetes cluster in this particular case, which was part of an AWS instance or an AWS tenant, which is awesome. And so now there's other pods in this particular tenant that we could potentially now have access to. And so with that breakout, we were then able to pull back more information from other pods and get access to cloud accounts that had access to other systems in that particular Kubernetes, in that particular cluster. And so this chain started from like SSRF application layer to an API endpoint to a particular pod getting access to additional service accounts that then had access to the overall cluster that then had access to other pods in the particular cluster. which is like a really cool kill chain because that's chaining a lot of vulnerabilities together to create a major impact of accessing a lot of other systems on that particular cluster that had access to a lot of sensitive information, including production data and databases.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's so unique about this kind of new AI paradigm is so many products historically have been kind of breadth first in my mind, right? Like they look at a single type of IT and they tell you, is it potentially vulnerable? Best case scenario, is it exploitable? But usually that's not quite what they check. Right? And like what I love about Armadin's kill chains is our ability to, every time we're able to go reach something, right, like and exploit it, we are able to start looking out again, right? Like we do reconnaissance, we find the next best target. Sometimes we find the next best 10, right? And we score them out in parallel. Right? And we're able to go find the next interesting point. And the graphics we have on the website, I think bring this to life better than my words do. But
For sure.
I think there's something just very compelling about the ability to take something that, SSRF on the internet, that's not good. That should be fixed. But is that something you're going to keep the team late tonight to fix? Most companies, I think the answer is no. When you're able to show that SSRF means that like production data gets stolen, all in the span of like a wandering AI attacker over the course of like hours, right? And like a targeted attack, I think you could run this whole thing in minutes with the context we have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is what you just said is like, what is the impact of that SSRF? And like most people will stop there. Oh, SSRF, it's vulnerable. We proved it, took the screenshot, put it in the report, we walk away. But like, what happens from there? We would not have found the vulnerable API endpoint. We wouldn't have been able to find the clear text database credentials that are stored and an overly permissive service account that had access to other pods and the systems on the cluster. Like, we wouldn't have been able to break out of the pod and been able to access. Like, that is such a cool story to continue from the SSRF versus just stopping at the SSRF. And so the way we measure risk is it's tailored to every single finding. It's based on exploitability and impact, right? And so like exploitability, very high. It's easy to do. It's a unauthenticated SSRF, like easy money, right? But the impact was very high because of the full kill chain. If we had just gotten access to some endpoint that didn't have access to anything, it had no permissions, it had no methods we could use, it was literally just boring, it probably would have been a low to medium impact. It would have changed the overall risk rating. And so that tailored risk rating per customer, per finding is so nice whenever you want to really prioritize remediation. And then furthermore, on the remediation side, like what's also really cool is what is a remediation here? Is it like, oh, fix the SSRF? Like that's one thing, but it's like, don't store clear text credentials in databases. It's remediate the SSRF. It's the vulnerability on the API endpoint that's vulnerable to a CV from 2025, right? Like, is there so much parts of the kill chain that can be remediated to sever the whole kill chain? And so what's cool about Armadin also, as you can attest to here, is, like the remediation guidance goes further than just the SSRF in this particular case as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's part of why, one of the things that gets me so excited about Armadin is our customers are treating these kill chains like security incidents, right? Like we have no ill intent for our customers, right? Like we're trying to prepare them for what's coming with AI, but they're not looking at this and like throwing it on the backlog as another proactive security tool. They're looking at this and they're keeping people there late to make sure it gets fixed today. And they have so many options, right? To your point, because this kill chain requires the SSRF to the CVE on the API endpoint they're probably not fixing the clear text database credentials, right? That's going to require a lot, but like fixing the SSRF today, like that doesn't feel impossible, right? Like right. You can get a new version out in time.
And there's multiple ways of doing it, right? Like one way is like, okay, fix your code to not allow SSRF. It's, put more permissions in place so that API endpoint may not be necessarily accessible, or maybe it is accessible from that particular endpoint.
Yep.
Another example is just throw authentication in front of it. Like that could be another one. So there's like multiple different ways to remediate depending on the customer use case. And that's another thing that we can help customers guide them through, like what's the best approach in the path of least resistance to sever that kill chain.
Yeah, love it. So I think let's move on to number 2, yeah?
Yeah.
So what you just heard, right, is another example from the outside in, right? That's the third one we've told you about, where we start on the internet and show how an AI-powered adversary can achieve an objective that scares a customer, right? And like the previous 2 we heard before Evan joined me were about remote code execution. I got enough questions from customers of why do I care about remote code execution? I think AI's raised the temperature. In my mind, that used to be a big deal. Now it's happening frequently. You're getting bug bounties about remote code execution. Armadin can show you the exact impact, right? Like we'll make it super, super clear which ones you need to fix today.
A good point on that. In this particular kill chain, the first one was, the CVE from 2025. There were some POCs on the internet that would allow you to exploit that particular POC. The LLM had enough context from pre-training and internet-based context that it crafted a custom POC for that particular CVE within like a minute or two. And so now we can say, right, with the power of LLMs, you can significantly scale like remote code execution, identify remote code execution, crafting a POC for it, even if it's a 0-day exploit. So it's pretty incredible. And then we can test it in like a lab environment, make sure it's stable, all good. But like, honestly, it's probably more stable than some of the freaking POCs I've seen on Git, for example. It's crazy. So anyways, it's a completely new world, man, in this world we're living in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's kind of raising the floor in my mind for what anyone can do. I mean, like, the script kiddies now can like just build their own exploits, right? Like using an LLM. It's crazy.
Everyone feels like a badass hacker now,
Yeah. I'm curious to see if we see the more sophisticated adversaries start to use the same technique. And we'll see, because they all have bosses, budgets, and deadlines, right? Like they've got a structure around them and a bureaucracy with a goal. But I'm curious how much we see the tactics and techniques of the whole world just kind of converge on what the LLMs are able to do.
Same.
Yeah. Anyway, so we talked about a new external, right? And this one I think shows super, super clear impact. Like this wasn't just we landed in a DMZ, we couldn't get anywhere, right? Like we were able to compromise, in this case, multiple cloud accounts, right? See real sensitive data. And we did all of this, by the way, in totally safe, right? Like I think that's the other point we haven't talked about is Armadin is safe AI attacks in real environments. So now let's talk about a different one, because everything we've talked about so far has been from the internet. It's not the only way Armadin operates, right? We also big believers in assumed breach testing and deep web app testing. And today I want to bring to life what one of those assumed breaches look like.
Yeah. I think for assumed breach, it's so important to understand, like in the example we just gave on coaching number 1, a lot of externally facing applications will land you on like a cloud environment, just like the example we gave you, a pod, a cluster, cloud data, databases, etc. But what about the corporate environment? What's going to happen like if your corporate environment were to get breached? And there's generally like 4 ways that you get breached from like in your corporate environment specifically. One of them is going to be social engineering, people gonna people.
Yeah.
Number 2 is going to be insider threat. That's a real threat right now.
Yeah.
The third one's going to be supply chain attacks. Like good luck preventing some of those. That's hard. You have a lot of vendors out there. If some of them gets compromised, they have some sort of access into your corporate environment. Like that's a risk. And then the fourth one is going to be external exploitation, which is an example that we just gave, but it's not as common because it doesn't always land you in the corporate environment. Like in the example we gave you in number 1, it's going to land you in a pod, which could potentially break out into a cluster or some sort of AWS or GCP tenant, something like that. And so like in the event that your corporate environment were to get breached from any one of the 4 ways I just described, let's determine like what happens from there. You really need to determine like what is the impact of us getting breached? Can someone access our crown jewels? Can they escalate privileges? Can they move laterally? And then in this kill chain, we're about to walk you through how we were able to do that and access an OT environment, which is really cool.
So as Evan was saying, we are starting this one from an assumed breach position, right? Like I think of this, and he explained a lot of different ways this can happen. It's like what happens when your sales guy, downloads the wrong attachment in an email, opens it, suddenly an adversary has access to a domain connected computer, right? It's on the corporate network. And I think this one's really interesting, right? This is for a large, in this case, Fortune 100 company. And we're going to show how for this company that really cares about the security of their OT, right? Their operational technology, how we're able to reach it and demonstrate that it was at risk. And so it's a story of impact, starting from an assumed breach and a very, very different domain than everything we've shown so far from the outside in. So what did we do? We started with this initial foothold, and we looked out at the environment, trying to understand what was there, right? Like we didn't have a ton of information. And we found a relatively old server, right? Once we got on it, we were able to look confidently and say this was a 2019 Windows server, or Windows 2019 server. We didn't know that at the time. And it was vulnerable specifically to Print Nightmare. Right? So this is an old, I think at this point, 5-year-old critical CVE. That lets us...
CVE from 2021.
Yeah. So got an operating system that's 7 years old. We got a CVE that's 5 years old. And it lets us essentially author a payload that gets run on the box. And we used that custom payload to make ourselves a local admin. Once we were on that server, we looked around and found that there was a database running locally. So this is, I think there's important context. This is not a networked database, right? Like the server is networked, but it wasn't exposed to the rest of the network. You had to be on the actual host to see it. And when we looked at what we saw, it looked a lot like a building management system database, right? We saw product names that helped us understand what we were looking at. We saw, operator credentials, things like usernames, password hashes. And we did a whole bunch of work trying to crack these password hashes before realizing that the passwords were actually stored in clear text right next to the password hashes. And so we took that username, we took that password, and we logged into the application that was hosted on the same endpoint. Logging in, we're able to understand everything going on in the application, right? So we could see sensor data, we could look across different OT networks, across different protocols. In my mind, this is a story of reachability, right? OT is almost never secure on its own, right? These are long-term, very expensive capital investments, almost never secure. And the best thing you can do is just make it not reachable, right? How do you make sure that when the sales guy clicks on a link, someone in China can't access your OT environment? And in this case, we found a path and we found it quickly.
Yeah, this was an interesting one because like most people, like the real way to separate OT is physically, like where you like physically air gap the network and you have to walk in to a specific, network that's not accessible from IT or corporate or whatever. But in this particular use case, the building management system that managed like I don't know if it was like the HVAC system or power or whatever for some of these OT buildings had to be accessible from some of the people in corp that manage those particular buildings. Instead of them having to walk in and access that building management system into a completely different location for convenience, which is always the situation, convenience versus security. Sometimes you have to give one for the other. In this particular case, for convenience, that building management system was accessible from corp. And then that had to have a route into specific systems. So like that was our route into OT. Another interesting thing about this particular use case was everything you just described is like exactly how we got access to OT in the building management system. But in that particular kill chain, after we exploited the print nightmare system, we generally what we do is we try to get more credentials, so there was a exclusion folder for the particular AV or ADR.
Yeah, it was Microsoft Defender, right?
Yeah, Defender. Yeah. And so, of course, whenever you're writing these DLLs or your any sort of like exploit code or particular malicious code, you want to run through the exclusion folder. So obviously it gets by everything. And in this particular case, we ran a payload that was able to pull back Kerberos tickets and additional credentials in this particular case. Got a service account, didn't really lead to anything or the particular, compromise that you're describing. But it's kind of interesting to talk about like how a kill chain doesn't have to be linear, right? It can like spread out. It could be like, hey, we tried the service accounts, nothing yielded there, but we continued down to the building management system, something yielded there, which is really cool as well. But yeah, like, watch your exclusion folders because we'll definitely live in there. And that's part of like the trade craft of some of how our agents work.
Yeah, this one was really notable to me because it was a Microsoft Defender antivirus exclusion folder, and it was specifically an exclusion folder set up for another cybersecurity product, right? Where like they wanted to run their executables away from all the AV blocking, and so it was like cybersecurity tool leading to exclusion, or rather exclusion configured in a cybersecurity tool that was created for a different cybersecurity tool to run correctly, and just like living in that environment as the attacker, right? Like
Exactly.
Completely undetected. Yeah.
This one was also interesting because like the CISO asked us, like, Evan, like this was a CV from 2021. This system was like very old. Like why? We've done pen testing every single year for the past like decade. Like why have we not seen this kind of stuff before? And like the answer is like we just never had the scale and coverage. Like we would do an annual pen test. We find one path to OT. We write up that entire path. It would generally time constrained to like 2 weeks or whatever the amount of time necessary to do the engagement. and we find that one path of least resistance. We give them reports, showed major impact. But what about the other paths? What about the other old systems that we could have leveraged to accomplish the same goal? And so we're in a completely new era of scale and coverage. Like we can now cover your entire attack surface across the board, right? External, internal, whatever endpoints that you have at a completely different speed than ever seen before. I mean, I'm excited about it because like I'm seeing it in real time, right? And so anyways, it's just like you're going to now uncover more paths than you've ever seen ever. And you're going to be able to find significantly more coverage. And so this is not going to be something that's like, oh my God, why didn't we find this before? It's going to be very common. You're going to see this uptick of old systems, a lot of CVEs, 0 days. And the idea is like, how do you sever these kill chains? And it's beyond just patching the system. It's what are the misconfigurations in your network architecture that you found that you can then leverage to sever the kill chain as well.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it really feels like a new era where before you found kind of the path of least resistance if you hired a pen tester. If you hired a product, you got this kind of broad, like breadth first, like doesn't go super deep. You don't understand, like the print nightmare CVE is a critical. It probably should be fixed, but like, you probably talk yourself into it's not internet exposed, like, it's not accessible by most users because like, like we think this is segmented on the network, right? And so you bump it down in priority in your head and it never gets patched or it gets patched really, really slowly. 6 years, 7 years slowly?
Too long.
Yeah, too long. Definitely past the normal SLA.
Yeah.
But I think it's this new world where we get to find all paths in all the time, right? And you were talking about how some of the attacks dead end, right? Like some of the trails do. I think that's part of the value we bring, right? As our AI, in my mind, our AI is going depth first, right? We're taking all the discipline and tradecraft that the best red teamers and pen testers in the world use, but we're able to fork off in parallel and explore more paths, right? And so you get actually really good coverage, right, with this depth first approach that used to just find you one path. And we do all the hard work of taking, massive attack data and just compressing it down into here are your findings, here are your kill chains, and here's remediation guidance for every single finding we create. I think there's so much value in that, right? Like, because you don't have to trawl through all these things we sent to a target system, what we heard back, what was our perspective, and stitch all this together into a coherent narrative. We do that for you.
Exactly. And in this particular kill chain, we get asked like, well, did you use that particular endpoint? So this particular system that had access to an OT environment and get into OT? And like, did you leverage that particular route and potentially permissions to access like the OT network? But in this particular kill chain, you're going to notice that we stopped at OT. And that's generally because like the goal is what are the routes that you could leverage to get access to OT, and what are the permission misconfigurations or privileges that you can leverage to like gain access to an OT account. And because generally, ideally, it's a different identity access management system than you do in Corp. Not always, but like that should be the case, right? And so the question is what happens after that, right? Like do we continue from there or do we stop? And to be honest, most of the time we stop at OT, and we have a particular expert team that will come in because it's a very sensitive environment. But what are your thoughts on assessing OT, Greg, in this new world of AI, and how we're ensuring like from that vantage point, what do you do from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on the minds of a lot of our customers, right? We work with some of the largest enterprises in the world. Many of them have massive OT deployment. They run some real system that is operational technology. And I don't know, I think as AI on offense has ramped up in cybersecurity, it's on everyone's minds. Like, is this safe? I like the idea that we build the very best attacker in the world and our customers are fully in control of it, right? Like, we let them tell us what's the scope, what are the rules of engagement, what are the objectives, and then we tell them all paths in all the time. And I think for OT, usually the most important thing to get right early is reachability, right? For these critical OT systems, can we get there? I think there's like two other stories I really like to emphasize with customers on the OT front. One is OT on the way. So I think of this as mostly an IoT story more than like a core OT system. Like, it's not usually you're building access control, but like that smart thermostat that doesn't have EDR installed, like often that's a wonderful pivot point in our attacks. And so OT is the target. Is it reachable? And making sure we help you sever all paths in. OT on the way to a different objective, right? Maybe we're going after the CEO's emails. And then third, I think, is just all about safety, right? Like Armadin is like a responsible actor. We run safe attacks in real environments, right? And like, I don't know, safety is really top of mind right now. Like we just saw in the news that OpenAI hacked Hugging Face. Anthropic announced a few days later that they'd actually breached 3 different organizations in their testing of cyber models. I don't know, Armadin's put a really strong focus on safety of cyber attacks using AI from the very beginning. And I don't know, it lets us do things like test OT systems safely for our customers.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely top of mind, a big priority for us for sure. I think in this particular use case, safety, one big component for safety, apart from like guardrails and, all that good stuff is the human in the loop piece in an OT network or internal in general. We do that human in the loop, component. So just not like let something go rampant. I don't know if you want to mention that or not.
Sure.
That would be, for this particular use case, I think a really good highlight that we're not just letting machines go off on their own, that we have a human expert that actually has like tried and true tradecraft and experience, kind of driving the AI in this case.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I think that's a great explanation. Let's just continue. I mean, in my mind, we take a layered approach to safety, right? We care about every agent along the way understands the rules of engagement. They're passed as instructions. I think we've seen with the Hugging Face hack that doesn't always go so well. Like Anthropic's their security incident disclosure on how they hacked companies, said the models were just internet connected and told not to use the internet. Clearly, they decided that using the internet was the best way to accomplish their objectives. And so, we believe that telling agents what the rules are is important. Making sure they understand the instructions and they don't deviate is good. And if models were perfectly aligned, that would be good enough. In practice, they're not, right? So we put controls around that to keep it safe. I mean, the second big one in my mind is deterministic. We want to make sure that when the customer tells us what's in scope, that we enforce that, right? And so maximally, we use things like network proxies to, more coming there too, right? But in my mind, we want to use things like network proxies to not have to do inference about what's allowed, but just like always block the thing that's not allowed. But I don't know, I think in an OT environment like this, like, the wrong command does something that hurts a lot of people, right? Like, I don't know, these are dangerous systems to mess with, and we think there's real value in having human supervision there, right? So having the ability to toggle from I'm going to run in full auto down to flag it to me when it looks dangerous, all the way to whenever you're on a sensitive OT system to just like, I want a human to like look at every single command that gets sent and okay it for safety, right? Like we don't want to impact the integrity or the availability of the systems. I don't know. It is like just the right way to operate. Our customers want to know if they're safe in today's like AI powered adversary world. And this is the best way to tell them.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. So specifically like on internal environments, OT, huge, and you want to have that human in the loop supervision, and especially particularly someone who actually knows how to operate on their own. So these are, particularly for Armadin, we have a team of elite experts that have been doing red teaming their entire careers before the AI shift of where AI is doing a lot of the work. So these are people that actually know exactly what to do, know what safe looks like, know what action should be done versus not, or be able to steer the AI in a particular direction that maybe it's not going or that it should be going. So that definitely provides another layer of safety that's incredible for OT and internal environments. And then for external, even if you let external, some people are comfortable with full auto mode because it's like, hey, if it's on the internet, someone else is going to be able to do the same thing, right? But the approach that we take, a lot of which is what Greg mentioned, but in addition to that is we have like a list of in-scope assets. Like a client will give us all their CIDR ranges. We do discovery on all their domain names, subsidiaries, etc. We confirm the scope of the customer before we let the AI go completely autonomous against that scope. And if it finds additional endpoints, which is going to happen, as it's going through different web applications and spidering, etc., some of those endpoints are going to be third party, and then some of them are going to be additional internal endpoints. It will cross-reference the internal endpoints with the assets that are known in scope, and then anything potentially that's third party or outside of that particular scope, it would need confirmation before it just goes and attacks that, right? Like that's a huge, just kind of like obvious way that you need to provide safety so it doesn't just go after whatever it wants to go after.
Yep, I completely agree. I think every CISO I talk to feels a duty to their organization to prepare them for what's coming with AI. Often they feel immense top-down pressure. I find that CEOs feel the most urgency, and the CIOs kind of pass it down, and the CISO feels it. And I mean, from first principles, they feel it, but they also feel it from their boss and their boss's boss. But in my mind, everyone's trying to prepare their organization for what's coming with AI. And I don't know a better way to prepare for the AI-powered adversary than to run a safe AI attack in real environments. I think we're going to call it here. So thank you for joining us at Black Hat 2026. Evan, thank you so much for joining me and walking us through some really cool kill chains and interesting discussion. Looking forward to having you and other folks on your team on in future episodes. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.